You're welcome to this lesson, and I hope you are following our lectures. I hope you are really making some purchase from what you've been doing so far in terms of creative writing. And then I imagine that your encounter with children's literature should be something quite exciting. I believe that you yourself could do something for one or two of your children on your own part. You might just want to create a kind of story for your child between 6 months to 5-6 years. It might be more adventurous to go a little bit further to get the range between 7 to 10 and 11. Now let's wrap that up a little bit here. Now we were talking about the fact that that particular age group of 7 to 10 and 11 begins a kind of journey into literature itself. That's the age range that you begin to filter, as it were, styles, storylines, begin to introduce them into, some longer distance reading, shorter dependence on pictures, and then you begin to introduce social themes, occurrences, some events that allow for rounded characterization, dialogue, and the like. Some of the stories we might be familiar with that will really get within this age range would include a series called Peter and Jane. I wonder if you know that series. Well, Peter and Jane can also be useful for that kindergarten group from scratch. For example, you want to introduce them to some names, some syllabic words, some beginnings. You find out that Peter and Jane also does something like that, especially when you look at, I think, from their series 1 to 3 or so, you can, bring that kind of thing within that age range. But then I'm talking about the more adventurous one that has to do with Peter and Jane, where the large scale of storytelling begins, where you begin to open up pages without having to encounter so many pictures. And then when it gets to that point, you are good to go. Now, I can remember that when I was young, there were adaptations of Shakespeare into prose fiction. I remember Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare. This couple, I think, brought together some Shakespearean plays and adapted this into fluid storytelling. I was able to enjoy those stories when I was right from the age of 11 and then moving on a little bit further into 12, 13, because Lamb's Tales from Shakespeare will accommodate the senior level, the senior group within this age group of 7 to 10 and 11, and then it starts a kind of beginning into real intercourses with prose narratives and intentional storytelling, with the beginnings of mastercrafts in bringing about the renditions of storylines. Now let's get to the very, very significant age that gets into the teen ages, right from 12 into the very teen ages, the early parts of the teen ages into the middle life of that group, from 12 to 16. What do we find out in terms of literature when we are dealing with this group? By the way, let me do a little recap. For 7 to 12, there are poems as well. Some short distance poems and poems that can talk about such things that can be remembered, such things that can echo the society's voice in terms of morality, in terms of industry, relationships, and the like. There are poems like that, and definitely some of them start with few pictures and really end up with introducing this age group into the larger scales of poetry. Now back to this particular age group, 12 to 16. At this age, we now have a fairly mature childhood group that very, very understandably should have gone beyond the primary school period, the type of education we call the first stage of education, bringing in into the disciplines of what you begin to discover as you read further in life. Now at this age, 12 to 16, there are actual launching. I can call this the launching age, the send forth age into literature. In this age group, intentional programs, plot structure, subject matters, thematic preoccupations are really incorporated and produced for the age range we are dealing with. We discover that this is the time when adventure stories start or begin to be such stories that people read, that really take the toll of the imaginative, the interesting, the puzzle solving, the accidental, the incidental, coming into perspective. And then this is the time when we can begin to actually launch into deep adventurous mysteries, deep human experiences, issues that can deal with what we may later call in non-fictional renditions, autobiographies, or life writing. Such kind of storylines that accommodate life writing become the kind of things that can be explored even in fictional terms for the literature of this age range. The sudden encounter of a particular event in a particular village or in a particular town or in a particular city that changes life forever and that makes people become people running away for their lives, becoming refugees, exiles. This kind of things can be brought in. We could have stories of adventures into lands that had never been explored and the like can be brought in here. Science fiction can be the darling of this kind of age group because we are dealing with an age that whose brain must be fertilized, an age whose imagination must be invested in. Science fiction will start at this age. We'll be very, very in tune at this kind of age. This kind of age can accommodate war stories. War not in a very, very complex way that adults read, but simple narratives about, let's say, organic plot structuring, where the story is linear, the plot line is linear. It has a kind of logicality of progression. The storyline moved from point A to B to C to D, and it can diverge at E, but then you know that there is a continuum in the way the story is flowing. We begin to do that within this kind of age group. For example, stories like Sir Rider Haggard's She Who Must Be Obeyed. Stories like Rider Haggard's The Return of Ayesha itself will be very okay. Oliver Twist would be a story, a novel within this kind of landscape. Oliver Twist, Gulliver's Travels, Silas Manners, and so on and so forth can be brought in. At this point, pictures are very, very sparse. Very, very sparse. The pictures can happen 4-5 pages away as you start. In fact, by the time you are getting to the age of, let's say, 13, 14, 15, it's normal that children of this age group might not necessarily be looking for pictures anymore. In fact, they ought to have been seen to have outgrown that pictorial guidance into understanding a storyline. They can now form these images as they read. They can now understand these images as they read. They can now follow things along that line. This age group can also begin to read drama. Drama is a rather technical, creative writing. It's quite technical. It has to do with a number of stylized, demarcations that have to do with physical and material things. It's just like bringing a play on a stage. Now, when you try to put that within drama in the context of creating the characterization, bringing about how the staging will be there, the props that will be brought into drama, the director's comments, and all those technical things, and then bringing in the characters that will be interacting. You've got to know that you are dealing with something that is rarely for children. It's rather something that would demand, a fairly developed mind that has been really trained into reading stories, following stories, and then this person can understand things like the stagecraft that is presented on script. So when we are dealing with this kind of age group, this is the time to really begin to introduce them to dramatic text and to begin to see how their brain negotiates the movement between a particular scene to another scene, how sudden conflicts happen, how the dramaturgy of presenting the lightings and then the props in relation to setting and dialogue come in. That is a quite advanced thing where drama comes a diet. This is the age group that one can introduce to the moment of writing dramatic text. We can use this kind of age group to experiment on philosophical and really ideological writings within literature. It's just that the kind of nuanced, complex, inorganic plot structure that we begin to find in advanced literature, especially in prose, is not launched on them. But then the beginnings of this can start the way we do literature for this age group. We can launch them into happenings of history. This is the age that can begin to read historical narratives, that can read narratives that have to do with ecology. This is the age that can begin story lines that have to do with gender politics, for example, the emergence of a nation state, legends within the nation state, issues that have to do with multiculturalism, interculturalism, and so on and so forth, that have to do with migration, diaspora, and the intricate development within those spaces. Not just the kind of thing you could have done for maybe ages 7 to 12, where, the migrant child might get to a particular place and you don't agonize the plot. You don't agonize the storyline to involve deeply emotional and tragic events that can remain immanent in adult readers. But you may start introducing this kind of little adult expose to this kind of age group as you deploy your language. Then, may I hazard that right from 15, 16 to late 17 years old, we may begin to do things like the plot structure, going forward and going backward in such a way that we are writing for the adult, because this is the moment they may be really introduced into what to expect next in adult life. And these things are very much significant in opening up, for example, the city, the intricacies of the city life, subculture. You might want to bring in things that have to do with, the AI and contemporary global development. You might want to bring in a number of things that might be really more information to an adult world that needs a kind of clarification on certain thematic objects and thematic concerns. So, in writing for children, we write in graduated forms. We move from one point to the other, and we've got to really understand the audience we are dealing with. Now, audiences of children might have to be looked at very, very interestingly and very, very delicately the moment we are going into this particular kind of age group from 12 to 16, and then negotiating the spaces of 15, 16 to 17 and all that. And then you might need to begin to negotiate more complex thematic preoccupations. You might want to do some more advanced aesthetic deployments. You might want to begin to introduce inorganic plot structure where the plot might be accommodating about 2 storylines at the same time that will meet at a particular point. You want to deal with a particular storyline that has a kind of dramatic sequence that regurgitates the motif of a film. You want to do a kind of foreshadowing, and you want to do a kind of flashback, something that can sophisticate the storyline, complicate the events within that storyline, and then single out particular characters as heroes, heroines, villains, and so many other things. You want to bring these things into perspective. These are the kind of things that might work within this age group. And then right from 18, although like we said, it doesn't always follow for every child, because the rate of mental development differs from one person to the other. And then you can't always say that, in this age range, everybody must be working in this particular way. But we are just trying to say that in the dominant scenario, this is what you find within these age groups. It's possible that somebody of age 16 or 15 is already doing readings that adults do, depending on the kind of things such a child has been exposed to. But what we are saying is that by the time a child gets to age 16, 17, if the child can read, that child should be able to follow up some more intricate subject matters, some more involving thematic preoccupations, and then the child can literally be suspended into the beginnings of adult reading. And what do I mean by adult reading? I simply mean any kind of reading that any adult, if that adult is literate, that adult can accommodate, that adult can make sense of, that adult can get particularly involved in, that adult can make choices about. So we do this for this kind of experimentation right from ages 12 towards 17 and thereabout. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been beautiful talking with you, but let me leave with these remarks. There is nothing interesting about creative writing if we can't go beyond the box, if we cannot go beyond what is normally expected and appropriate these things into peculiar and very demanding situations where creativity matters. We can deploy creative writing, as we have said, in our blog posts. We can experiment within a prose blog certain elements of poetry. Even if you are writing for a company, it helps you to be nuanced in language as you deploy some poetic effects within, let's say, a proposal to get a particular grant or a particular nod for a contract or whatever, and you are writing as a content writer for a particular company. You might, with the knowledge of poetry, with the knowledge of being imaginative, you might write in such an arresting way that the reader wants to go on with your piece. It comes to a point where when something is just so dry, just so monolithic, that we want to drop what we are reading. But a creative writer can create suspense even in a proposal writing that has to do with financial organizations. The creative writer can start with a puzzle, something like a series of rhetorical questions, and then begins to narrate the aims, the objectives of the company, what they need to do, and so on and so forth. It's all about nuance. It's all about how you write, creative writing. As a ghostwriter, maybe writing autobiography or writing a prose fiction for somebody or writing poetry, whatever the case may be, you will need to know the person telling you to write for him or her already has an idea, already has a target. Number one thing you need to get is what the person wants. And then you've got to get the nitty-gritties of the emphasis the person wants to make in that thing. Hear the story out loud, or hear the paradigms, the contours of what you want to write. And then it's just like adding flesh to some bones. And you want the flesh not to just be any kind of flesh. Flesh we can talk about in terms of the way they appear. You can have stout flesh, you can have fairly healthy flesh, and you can have a very blooming, healthy, nourished flesh. I'm sure what you want to achieve is the nourished type, and that has to do with a whole lot of faculty, a whole lot of involvement in what you are writing. You want to even do what people have not done before that way. that can bring in some new things, experimentations that might be very novel in the way you write. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been wonderful having your attention, wonderful talking with you, and I hope you've gained one or two things from this series of lectures from creative writing. Please stay glued to LSW. There are more content coming your way. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you share, and make sure you like this. Thank you very much.